Okay. So, thank you, Sam. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the Bank of England's view on the benefits of a more diverse workforce, ideally one with gender parity, both within your institution, but also within the financial firms that the PRA supervises.
Great. Thank you, Nicholas. And hi, everyone. Very sorry that I can't be with you there in person today for diary reasons, but did want to say a big thank you to Francois Louis, Jose Manuel, and the team for including us because the ESAs are our beloved brethren, indeed our sorority across the channel, and we miss you very much. So thanks for including us. Coming to your question, Nicholas, we've actually had to articulate this recently in a regulatory sense because we've got some proposals out there for promoting diversity and inclusion. And in that context, we've been very focused and we've really only gone to two things. The first one is the benefit in terms of accessing all the range of talent that we have here in the UK of this sort of an agenda. We've done that quite lightly, by the way, in our regulatory mode, because we think that's a bit more for the market. But internally, that's much more our motivation. But then the second reason that we have actually majored on quite a lot, and this is quite specific to us, is that we do have a reasonable amount of evidence that a lack of diversity and inclusiveness in a workforce can lead to a high risk of groupthink. And because we're interested in safety and soundness, we know there can be a linkage between groupthink and financial disasters of various kinds. So in a regulatory sense, we've been very careful to say on that. And we say that is our premise. Obviously, a very important part of that is gender.
Okay, and what has the Bank of England specifically been doing to increase the share of women at all levels within its own institution?
Well, Nick, I'm glad you said at all levels because it's a bit of a mixed picture, but it's not perhaps the mixed picture that people would assume. So actually, at the top of the organisation at the moment, we're in a reasonable shape in that we have only 4 deputy governors, which is admittedly still quite a lot. But of the 4 deputy governors, currently 2 are men and 2 are women. But that's a small number, so that can vary through time. That wasn't true even a year ago. But the next group down is our executive directors, of whom there are around 30. There are actually more women in that layer than there are men at the moment. But what I notice is, and I've noticed this throughout my time in this job, and I have failed to improve it, rather to my annoyance, is that we do have a persistent drop-off in the gender mix of about a 5 or 10 point drop-off at a sort of middle management layer. That is quite common in organizations, but I have found that very, very difficult to do anything about. Now, what we have been doing, I hope has also made some difference. But interestingly, what happens in our organization is after the middle management layer, then it comes back in at the more senior layers. So I don't know if that's normal, but that's at least been the experience. Things we've been doing, obviously we've done lots of different things, but let me just pick out the ones that have been interesting. One, we've got a thing which is called our Career Returners program. Probably some of you have that as well. That's been great, really great for us in all sorts of ways, actually. We have worked quite hard on our job descriptions because we did discover that the way we were describing jobs unintentionally had a kind of gender bias in it. It wasn't, visible in a crude way, but it was actually visible in how people reacted to the ad. So we've changed that, and that's been quite helpful. We put a lot of effort, and this comes down to a recruiting manager when recruiting, particularly for promotions, making sure that we've got a field that is diverse, particularly across gender and in other respects too. We have been, I think, pretty good on flexible working. It's interesting because that appeals to all of our workforce, actually. It's not something which is specific to one gender, but it is the case that our female staff raise that issue more strongly even now than our male staff. And that's changing, I guess, through time, but for the moment, it's very important. So I feel quite good about that. The one bit that we really haven't quite got right yet is we do have quite a generous and now gender neutral parental leave allowance here at the bank, which is great. But we're still not that good at the process when people come back in off parental leave. And we had a review of this recently, and that was the one thing that came up, was that surely we can do better on that.
Well, that brings me to my last point then, Sam. You've spoken to the level of the middle management. You've spoken to some areas of improvement there that you'd like to see. But what would be the key deliverables that you'd like to be able to achieve in the coming years? And the next time that you speak at an EBA conference, what would the progress be that you'd like to be able to report on this?
Well, look, I thought the best way to answer that question would be to tell you, what's happening in UK financial services on gender mix, which is kind of interesting actually. So if you look at it at board level for UK financial services firms, the percentage of board members who are female today is 37%. That's obviously a long way south of parity, which is what we want to aim for, but it is up from 23% since 2018. So that has been moving quite fast. And in the last year, I was looking also at the flow rate. It's interesting. 58% of the appointments to the boards of the financial services firms in the UK were women. And I know from my own interactions with firms, because obviously I'm often talking to chairs about what they're doing with board composition, it is a very front of mind consideration. Now, all of that, by the way, I say this with some chagrin as a regulator, that's been private sector led. That's, we've encouraged it, of course. And of course, as we all know, we've got bits of regulation which speak in that way, which we've inherited from our membership of the EU. But actually, if I'm honest, that's been a private sector drive. But if I look at some other sort of cuts on it, we've got figures for the top three roles. So that's CEO, chair, and CFO. And the percentage of those roles, which is currently filled by women in the UK, is only 21%. So that's really quite a lot lower. So clearly, some of the non-exec appointments are covering a bit of the gap, and I think it's quite useful to pull out those kind of key roles to see what that looks like. Interestingly, though, if you look at the top 20, so that would be chair, CEO, CFO, and then the next most senior people, which would be the executive committee and maybe a few others. That percentage is 39%. So maybe the pipeline is looking a bit better, or maybe it's been that way for a long time. I haven't had a chance to look backwards, but there's a gap between the 39% in that sort of overall there and the 21% at the top. And I must say, I recognize that gap. I was in a meeting with actually 80 chief executives yesterday, and it was overwhelmingly male. So that is still an area where things have not moved as much. And we do, of course, have something here in the UK, which is our current chancellor, which is our Minister of Finance, is a woman. But it's a remarkable fact that she is the first woman to inhabit that role. We've had many women prime ministers, so perhaps many is too strong. We've had several anyway in quite recent times and further back. So it does make me think, when I look at this, and I look at the much larger gender pay gap we have in financial services, which is just shy of 24%, whereas the average across the country is about 12%. That there's more work I think to do on this in financial services than in some other areas. I think that is a fair comment. And I guess if I'm lucky enough to be invited back, despite having been so spectacularly boring today, Nicholas, it is early in the morning, to be fair, when we're recording this, I would love to come back and be able to tell you that each of those numbers had moved up in a material way.
Well, I certainly didn't find it boring. Thanks very much, Sam, for the interview and your time.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks.